And introducing Lilia Brummel, or is it Lilia Wright? I'm not sure which you prefer.
Oh, I got married this past year, and so
Oh,
Lilia Brummel.
congratulations. And then Dr. Michele Villagran from San Jose State University. Please tell us all about students amplifying your voices.
Thank you so much. I'm going to keep my camera off because I'm not here, but I am here. So you can see me on screen picture. But anyway, so this is really exciting for both Lilia and I. This is actually the third time we have presented for at the Peralta Online Equity Conference. And we're really grateful because this is an ongoing project, and this is now our kind of phase 3 or final part 2 of the project. So we want to give you highlights on that project. But I am an associate professor at the School of Information at SJSU, San Jose State University. And today I have with me one of our great student assistants working on this project, Lilia. Do you want to say hello?
My name is Lilia Brummel, and I am a master's in library science, information and library sciences student at San Jose State University, working to get my master's. And I'm excited to share this project with you.
Thank you, Lilia. And we also have 2 other team members that couldn't be with us today, but I'd be remiss if I didn't, thank them because they're instrumental to this project. So Paula Mondragon and Matsko Friedland both worked on certain aspects, and today we're going to cover the full project. Next slide, Lilia. We do have a detailed land acknowledgement. I'm not going to read all of this. I'll probably cover just the first portion here, but it's really important that we do acknowledge while we're gathered here, we're gathered on the tribal territories of the Ohlone tribe, who are the direct ancestors of the lineages enrolled in the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and who are missionized in Mission Santa Clara, San Jose, and San Dolores. Just take a moment, recognize, where you work and acknowledge that and the lands that you're on, even though we are in other lands as well. But thank you for the land acknowledgement. Next slide. So just brief background. For those that weren't with us at 2023, the recordings are on YouTube, where we discussed with you the origins behind the first piece, which was Your Voices, Learning, Listening, and Sharing. And it actually came out of 4 years ago, our original college we were in, which now we are renamed, and we are a new college, the College of Information, Data, and Society. But there were some extreme findings we felt that came out of this working group, and you see the percentages here. And the biggest one that was striking to me was that students in our college at the time were unsure if the college is supportive of diverse students and welcoming to diverse perspectives and voices. So that was really the initial, why do we need this project, and let's make it happen. Next slide. So in 22 to 23, I received an award, technically just a buyout of a class to proceed with a service project really aimed at empowering our underrepresented graduate students, specifically in the library and information science and the applied data science school and departments. So we offered many things at that time. We had community learning spaces, which we are continuing. Lilia will address those later for part 2. We also at the time had e-newsletters and several webinars. And those are all, you can find it all on our website that we'll put in the chat in a minute. But if you do want to look at the recordings, in 23, we again talked about the Your Voices project. And in 24, 2 other students that were really instrumental for part 1 and leading into part 2, we created a best practice guide, which I will briefly mention today, because again, in 2024, there was a deep dive into that guide, and it is open access, freely accessible to you. But today, later on in a few minutes, we'll focus on SAVI, which is Students Amplifying Your Voices, which is part 2 of this project. Next slide. So let me talk about the kind of the best practices guide and what that was. This was not a part of the original proposal and what we were going to do, but we thought we need to have a culminating piece of part one, not just a report of, how many people attended and what the outcomes were, but to really create a deliverable that others could look at and use. And in this best practice guide is everything from logistical planning, how to communicate and market a project like this so that organizations like yours can replicate something very much similar in your organizations and with your students. And Lilia put a link to the actual site where you can take a look at this. So next slide, Lilia. So this is the guide that came about. Again, just to give you a snapshot, if you don't go to the link, what it looks like. But next slide. I'm going to talk about only, I think, 2 key aspects because there's so much in here as far as best practices. So really, again, we're focusing on how we can meet the needs of underrepresented groups through these activities we created for a year. But along the way, of course, it takes a lot of research, planning, coordinating processes, workflows, who do you talk to for what, how do you market, so many things. And so logistically, we really had to identify internal and external stakeholders. So learning like whom, and we already had the data from a college, the college working group, but then we also did our own survey prior within the School of Information. So we had that data as well. But we really need to find out who should we target. I don't want to say target, but who should we collaborate with, partner with, and then how can we get the communication out? So that was number one, was identifying stakeholders. And then doing really that needs assessment around our programming and what types of things we could offer. The community learning spaces, which are akin to, you can think of it as like an employee resource group, but more of a student resource group or a student support group or an affinity group. That was a really big interest through the survey that students wanted. They asked for those type of spaces, which we didn't have at the time. I should also mention that our school, the Master's in Library and Information Science, is 100% online. We've been asynchronous since 2009. So offering spaces and places that are virtual for students to continue to have, meaningful conversations and support each other. Both of these projects, additionally, are student-centered, student-driven. Faculty are not involved with the community learning spaces. This is all developed. I mean, I had the idea and the vision and guide the team that's working on it, but it's really the students created these venues or spaces for their colleagues and peers. And that's where the activities too, thinking about requirements to graduate, how can we increase engagement? I think engagement was the biggest and still is one of the biggest things because of the formats with which we go to school. Next slide. The other thing to mention here is really about marketing and communication. And there's so much when it comes to this. This is just one piece of the full best practice guide. But again, brand identity. Everything from creating our logo. So we work with our marketing to create logos, template language, also following our institution's brand guide. Thinking about just schemas and all of the aspects when it comes to marketing. And then promoting. How do you promote? Where do you promote? Do you have calendars? Right now, we're using some tools to help with kind of our project management structure. So we have task assignments and everyone has things they have to do to make sure that we're promoting to the right audiences and getting the communication out when, say, one of our podcasts is released. And then the other big thing, and this I think we're seeing a lot with Savvy, is the meeting the students where they are. So going to the students, no expectation for them to come to us, but to really work with different departments, work with faculty to share with their students, and other students sharing with their peers about this project and work and what it might lead to. Next slide. So that's just a snippet of the best practice guide, but you can go take a look at the full guide and the prior reporting for more and more details, because I know that Kara and Laura, who were formerly on this project, did a really nice demonstration of that site and talked about all of the pieces. So that happened 2022, 2023, and then the best practice guide kind of came over the summer. but I wanted to continue the project. I said, we're not doing enough. And we're still not doing enough. This should be a permanent project, but we're working with, the capacities we have right now. And I was fortunate to get another award to be able to do this part 2 project. So students amplifying your voices, student-centered, student-run spaces, very similar to your voices, but we took a different, I think, approach in the sense that now, well, number one, there's additional students working on this project, where before there was only primarily one student and then say 1.5, because then there was only a few hours added for an additional student to support it. And now there's 3 students who've been supporting this project, which is fabulous. And then second, I would say we really looked at the different tools and elements we were, I guess, combining and creating with your voices, the first project, and realized that the e-newsletters were not like, we'd send them out, but it's another email you get. They weren't really an engagement tool, it was a one-way communication. And so what other ways and what other smaller bits could we do that students might really appreciate? So Savvy then includes the community learning spaces, which I mentioned, podcast, we create a full podcast series, and a Discord. So next slide. This kind of gives you if you need one slide to remember about Savvy, this is it. Our goals, again, continuing with making this really centered and driven and dedicated for students within our college, and also thinking about diverse communities. We have, I think it's 60 or 65% first gen. The Latinx, Latina, Latino, Latina community of students is our largest at about 25%. And then we have pretty significant representation of many other underrepresented groups. So we wanted to ensure that this really is focused on a diverse nature and pulls in engagement opportunities for almost that demographic or specific intersectional identities. And I mentioned about, meeting the students where they are. So what are their needs? And we've collected a lot of data. We have a survey collecting feedback from them to understand, like, really, what are your needs and supports that you aren't getting right now? And how can this project help at least fill, if it can, some of those voids? So the 3 components, the community learning spaces, which I talked much about, and Lily is going to cover those in more detail. The Discord it's interesting because Discord, there's so many other platforms or tools. Discord and the CLSs almost go hand in hand. I think the Discord, and I'm not in the Discord, I was when it was set up, but of course, again, these are spaces for students. So the Discord is a great space for them to continue these dialogues and have even other organic conversations. And the Discord can live even beyond this project. And then the podcast. So our podcast is From the Fringes to the Foreground, shining the spotlight on student voices. We've already released 2 episodes, and we have other episodes coming that are ready. I know one this week, and I think one in a few weeks. But really, where students can share their experiences, their concerns related to whether it's a project they've worked on or currently working on, or maybe something that came up, through their path going to the university. And so next slide. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lilia, and she'll cover the 3 core components of Savvy.
Thank you, Dr. V. So the next part I will go over is community learning spaces. So we decided to put a plot twist on to affinity groups to turn them into community learning spaces, or CLS. We hosted 4 CLSs, like support group meetings, to allow students who share one or more identities to gather, learn, share, and talk in a safe space where they can talk about issues related to their identities. Their discussions would be then translated into actionable or equitable steps to improve their experience at the high school. And during these meetings, everything is confidential. We do gather some data, but we don't collect any personal identifiable information or anything like that. Just general feedback from these students. Neat. And so community learning spaces are an alternative to affinity groups. The term derives from the word lagnape, which means something given or obtained graciously or in a way of good measure. The term embodies the definition of a community sharing space by allowing students who share one or more identities to gather and learn, listen, and share and talk in a safe space. And then there's the quote, "Nothing about us without us is for us." So conversations about student issues should be led by students and held in confidence. And we hired students as moderators to represent the underserved students you're trying to serve, and students are a vital component to the project's success. And so we recruited moderators through sending emails through our iSchool alerts, and people were able to explicitly express interest in going through training with us on a Zoom call to be able to facilitate conversation in a safe space, but also mitigate any potential issues. And then by the end of the CLS, we were able to obtain information from people and their feedback. So from 2022 to 2023, we recruited topics and participants through a Google form that was sent through iSchool alerts, and then dates and topics were chosen by students. So no more than 3 communities chosen per response. And so we hosted a neurodivergent group meeting, people with disabilities meeting, self-care and wellness meeting, and the LGBTQIA plus meeting. And then from 2024 to this semester, spring 25, we continued recruitment with the same methodologies. And then dates and topics were again chosen by students. And we have hosted a Latinx or Latina community group meeting, and then the LGBTQIA plus meeting. And we did encounter some challenges. There is a large interest among students to connect with peers and create a sense of belonging to a community. The first challenge that we faced was trying to determine what days and times work best for students to meet, because students have varying schedules, they have obligations outside of school and work, and it makes it difficult to get every student who's interested to participate. And then the second challenge we faced was meeting in a virtual environment. In an in-person scenario, it's easier to create and facilitate discussion or do activities such as like board games or go bowling with peers in a much more relaxed and informal setting. And then we also noticed that our students use Discord primarily for its chat functions rather than informal meetings. And students are also more familiar with using Zoom because we use Zoom a lot for our classes. And so we decided to migrate our CLS meetings to Zoom for ease of use. And for spring 2025, we've had a total of 48 students fill out our Savvy general interest form. And then 27 students filled out the CLS participation form, meaning they wanted to actually actively participate in a meeting. And then we also had 24 students registered to participate in either the LGBTQIA plus or Latin CLS meeting. And then the best part of the whole CLS experience was the feedback that we received from students. So here are some memorable comments that we received. The first one is, "It was affirming to hear that a lot of us seek community and have felt that there were barriers to participating in a community." And this first comment was from the Latinx meeting participants that expressed the desire for community, and students just want to feel heard and seen. And then the second comment is, I loved hearing everyone's journeys and how they ended up at the high school. And so the second comment was also from the Latinx CLS participants. And SAVI was able to provide a space where students could share their stories in a safe space without judgment. And then the third comment, simply knowing there are other LGBTQIA plus students on campus is helpful. The third comment was from an LGBTQIA plus participant. The distance learning experience can often feel isolating. And so students also face all sorts of things, including self-doubt. And so creating opportunities for students with similar experiences to connect helps combat feelings of isolation. So when students share their experiences and their stories, they realize, I do belong here. I am not alone. And that's the whole point that we've been trying to implement and continue implementing. And then the second part of this project was the Discord server. So this is the newest element of SAVI, and this was a direct response in the need to create a safe space for students to build and find community with other students who share one or more identities with them. The Discord server will host our community learning spaces and other virtual events. All right. And so with the Discord server, we ended up creating multiple channels for each affinity group. So the Asian American group, the Black or African diaspora group, the Hispanic or Latinx group, the Middle Eastern group, Native Indigenous groups, each got their own separate channel. And then we also had a big general channel that was just open for anyone to have open discussions. And then we also implemented a community agreement, which provides a blueprint for navigating conversations held in the server. Well, we affirmed our commitment to respecting identities and creating a welcoming space. We also made it known that we also won't tolerate or record any screenshotting of conversations without notification or consent presented. And in this creating this Discord, we also adopted Dr. Rashia's dismiss step in, step back, and step out strategy for creating space for other students and themselves when participating in conversations and activities on sensitive topics. So students would step into the circle, offer questions, ideas, insights, from their experiences, and then students would step back and listen and give other space. And then students would step out when they need to draw boundaries. And we also ask that students refrain from offering advice or telling others how to feel. And that is what is said in the Discord server stays in the Discord server. All right, and something really cool happened this semester. Usually after each CLS meeting, we collect student feedback through post-participation surveys, and general issues were raised during discussions. One common theme that we noticed was the desire to have more LGBTQIA spaces, such as somewhere to network, have events in the space of the iSchool. And so based on this feedback, myself and my colleagues and Dr. V, we all came to the drawing table to try to come up with ideas to how to help this community have, or how to create space where there isn't any at this point. And so we updated our Discord servers and we included new channels that reflect topics of interest and to encourage peer discussion. So there was significant interest in staying current with the news affecting the LGBTQIA plus community, learning about relevant community events, and so in response, we created channels specifically to these topics. And then we also added a good news channels where students can share their wins, both big and small, to foster a supportive environment. We introduced a channel for organizing student group meetings or study sessions. And then we also created a shared the load channel, offering space for students to vent or seek out encouragement when needed. And then we also noticed the challenges students face in balancing work, school, home life, and the difficulty to add in coordinating various schedules with peers in an informal meetup environment. And so to encourage more meaningful interactions, we also decided to host and schedule informal group meetings led by volunteer discussion moderators from the LGBTQIA+ community. So we created a poll in the Discord and determined what day and time worked best for most students. And we hope with Savvy managing the logistics, the marketing, that these initiatives will lead to more opportunities for students to connect and support one another. To date, we currently have 48 students participating in our Discord. And then the last piece of Savvy is our podcast series. And it's for each episode that we have, SJSU students and student organizations can advertise events or news to share with the Savvy community. We include a link to our Google forum to submit blurbs for the show. And students and organizations can also use the same link to indicate interest in sharing their voices as guests on future podcast episodes. All right, and so we currently have 2 episodes available. So our first episode features Catherine Witzig and Brandon Castle. They are recent graduates of the University of Illinois of Urbana and Champaign and San Jose State University, respectively. They're also co-chairs of the program for cooperative cataloging, a task group for metadata related to Indigenous peoples of the Americas. The task group is working to create meaningful contributions to the conversation of metadata justice for Indigenous communities. Their statements and recommendations will be issued to the Library of Congress to improve standards and organizations. And then the second episode, we have Mavie Ma, who runs a informal student group for neurodivergence and people with disabilities. She hosts a once a week focus study session, and she's able to help students during the week and kind of try to create a sense of community within that group. Hey, Dr. V, did you know which parts of the podcast that you wanted?
No, I guess choose either. We have time, so if you want to play a few minutes of either or both episodes. Maybe fast forward though, past the introduction. We didn't plan on where we should start, and they're about, like, as you see, 40 minutes, 35 minutes, depending if there's the intro and the outro count as well. And I will say Paola has done a really great job. Lucas worked on these before, and now Paola, who isn't with us today, but is doing all of this, the editing, uploading, collecting the resources, interviewing them. And so the first one, Lilia, if you don't mind, I'll explain a little bit. The first one is actually 2 people talking, have a conversation together. They know each other, so they're speaking with one another. So instead of us, when someone from the team, like Paola, interviewing them, there's still the interview where Lucas was interviewing them, but then it was an organic conversation they had about talking about the project and how it came to be and what they're doing and what's next. And then the second one with Mavie is an interview, in the sense that Paola's interviewing Mavie about, this neurodivergent group, how it came about, what it is. So I think let's play, a few minutes from both. I'll let you just.
Let me pick.
Sure.
We'll see. Usually there's a little.
What I didn't know. So it was exciting to hear you introduce yourself in your language. That was very cool.
Yeah, I mean, same to you. I really love how, like for me, learning that was such an essential part of understanding, like, oh wow, our languages have so much knowledge within them. So it's always really great when like people get to connect to that. So yeah. Great to hear.
I have a strong background in language learning. So I did my first undergraduate degree in English and then my second undergraduate degree in Spanish. So I've always been really attuned to kind of all that extra weight that language carries. But you know, for me, having grown up away from the Choctaw culture, I didn't really know what I didn't know. So it definitely took me a long time to get to the point where I was willing to put myself out there to start learning the language because it's a really tough thing. So I really always adore when people are introducing themselves in their indigenous languages because it just brings up so much.
Yeah, it brings up a lot, and I can relate to the experience of coming, like like connecting, I guess is one word, but just like coming to like have a fuller understanding of like my family's history and culture, and then learning the language like was such a essential part of like really starting to feel like a little more connected to like my family because they try to practice as much as they can. So I think just being able to like speak it and just feel like there's like a stronger connection, I feel like is what is really great. But then yeah, like also like you were saying, like the weight of that, it's like my grandma, she spoke it and then just kind of stopped and it wasn't really passed down, but now people are talking in the language so much more, and I feel like that's kind of how I got into the profession that I'm in. And maybe you have similar entry points where it was like there's all of this information out there about Indigenous people, but like what does it actually like really mean, and like what is the depth of these terms that Indigenous people refer to themselves as. Like I was in a museum setting, like I was doing tours and sharing like a lot of information with people, and I think that's kind of when I was like, oh, I don't want to share the deep like stuff with people, or like let people know there's this deeper layer. So that's kind of what I is bringing me here like on this journey, I feel like.
Yeah, I really like the idea of reconnection because I feel like those kind of cyclical patterns is kind of what brought me to the field of librarianship. I was feeling those kind of patterns and those pushes and those pulls. And it always felt like libraries as an institution that brings people together, that shares knowledge, that brings people power, not even brings people power, but like draws the power out of them. It was something that I kept coming back to. And so even though I kept, thinking about potentially doing different paths, there was a point in time where I thought I was going to be a teacher, a high school teacher. It kept coming back to libraries, and that's what it was for me.
All right, and then we'll go to the second one with Mimi.
Or bachelor's in computer science.
And I'm part of a Facebook group, and I just asked around, are there any Asian American librarians, like library professionals? Well, how did you do this? And so a few people were really awesome. I got so many awesome responses, but a few even had me come over in person to just talk with them and explain their journey from their own career changes or the steps to take to apply to library school, and how San Jose State's was super easy to apply to. It kind of went from there. I was just really lucky that San Jose Public Library had an opening at that time.
Yeah, it's really wonderful that that community sort of helped you find that position and get into the program. So that was part of you getting into the library and information field. But how did you sort of get to where you are now with your interests in working in library and information science? I know you said you're interested in being a public librarian, but I know you have special interests in being an advocate for these communities that you come from, for Asians and Pacific Islanders with disabilities. So if you don't mind talking about your experience sort of leading up to wanting to become this advocate in this space.
I had pursued some official diagnoses, anticipating returning to grad school, thinking that it would make my experience of school much better, trying to navigate disability services at school, paired with, well, part of what made me want to do a career change was I realized that being at a desk job and completely work from home wasn't really good for my mental health. And what I loved about working at the library was how varied it was, and I could be walking around talking to people and not just at a desk the entire day. But also using like my social skills in my hands and touching the books, and I really loved that. But San Jose Public Library was really supportive of me exploring different equity, diversity, and inclusion units within for the staff. The racial equity team, the Asian and Pacific Islander affinity group, and the Disabilities Access Committee. And they all had this intersection of how can we improve things for staff, library staff, as well as bringing better service to the community. And it was in these spaces I was able to meet other professionals like me who are further along, and I could talk about things I was experiencing in school and hear validation about, oh, like we think that doesn't sound quite right in the workplace. You could ask for accommodations and you don't have to disclose a bunch of information. Whereas at SJSU, there's a very thorough process, very invasive questionnaire process. I've tried to go through that several.
All right. So that's those are a couple of snippets that we have. And then we'll go back to our slides. So these are available on Spotify. And then if anyone is interested in joining the Savvy community or staying up to date on our latest news or events, you can join our listserv, and you can also email us at yourvoices.sjsu@gmail.com. And Dr. V just put the link to the forum in the chat. And then we have some questions for all of you in the audience. So what questions do you have so far about Savvy specifically?
Feel free to post your questions in the chat or to raise your hand and we'll call on you to use your microphone.
I have a question. Lilia,
Yes.
since I didn't see your hands. Since I know you're going to be, the project's coming to an end, what would you like to see happen to Savvy after this, or your voices?
Oh, that's a good question. I
Or
would
which
love,
or which pieces would you like to see continue from
I would,
based on feedback you've heard from students?
yeah, I would love for the podcast to continue. Students really enjoy listening to other people's experiences, and given the virtual environment that we're in, it makes it more accessible to more people, if that makes sense.
Okay, great. That was an off that, collecting data.
Yeah.
Well, and I think along those lines, so, when projects like this are student-led, it often requires a kind of passing the baton to a new group of students when other people are getting ready to graduate or move on to employment and things like that. So does the Savvy program, is it thinking about building in any elements like that so that people who are farther behind or just beginning their studies can get involved and possibly take over the leadership roles once others have moved on?
A great question. Part of the challenge, I think, so these are, luckily, our school has supported the students, so they get paid to be in these positions as student assistants.
Mhm.
The challenge is, of course, budget cuts, and then
Yes.
also, like, I want to continue this just because I love it so much, and it's core to what my work and what I do. But the time, so I'd have to apply for some other type of award, and there's no funding tied to, like, I would really love, like, I provide out of my own money incentives to the students that participate in the podcast because that's their time, a lot of effort they go through to put together and participate in those and share their experiences. So it's like out of my own pocket. But I think we're going to have to figure out a way to keep it going, even if it's like an organic component. Like it just keeps, like, it sounds like our CLSs too are now organically becoming a permanent part with collaborating with other student groups like the Anapesi group and others, that it just seems like there's this organic nature to continue doing and having these spaces. And Discord too. I mean, I think that's what we're hoping with the Discord. It becomes this ongoing conversations that continue. But we should have like a contingency plan or an ongoing plan. And thank you for that, because we need to do a final report, and I think that would be a recommendation to our leadership.
And I could see, given the current budget climate, right? If there's not room in the budget for it to continue through San Jose State this time around, are there other organizations or maybe other Cal States that would want to band together to create maybe a larger umbrella under which they could fund something like this, and so that it could continue, but maybe with a wider audience, which would still serve San Jose State students, but would include others. I'm just thinking outside the box.
Yeah, I thought about that and talking with the chancellor's office, because I actually have a proposal for that, but it was tied to a grant, and grants are getting cut, so that's the other bit. But there might be, I think, a smaller way, not the whole big project, maybe a piece of it. So it's only podcasts. I think there'd definitely be interest, or maybe starting with a few of the school or universities versus all 23 campuses, and then build it up and roll it out across, all campuses. It's a great idea. Thank you for that.
And maybe even reaching out to like American Library Association or other organizations that they might not be in the same boat as the colleges and universities around the country right now with respect to funding. And again, this could be something that different groups take ownership over it, but San Jose State could be kind of the central hub, pulling in different funding sources and voices as you go.
Yes, great idea. Thank you. Are there other questions? We had these other ones on here too, because we want to know, learn from you if you have similar projects like this or student-centered spaces where underrepresented students can, engage with one another and exchange ideas. Or what are you doing in your institutions or organizations? And similarly, I guess the encouragement, because I mean, students are so busy, and it's just like everyone, and it's hard to get on their radar, I think, a lot of times, to be involved and engage with projects like this that are really voluntary unless there's a definite need. And here we found a need and we're filling that gap. But if they don't know about us, with the marketing and all that comes into play.
Well, ironically, the student-centered space that I know about doesn't exist anymore, but it came out of San Jose State. It was called Suerte, and it was a group of students that had transferred from Evergreen Valley College to San Jose State, and it was student-led. They basically created a cycle where those students that had made the transfer successfully went back to Evergreen College to share with the next cohort of students what they needed to do to be successful as well. And so it was kind of a way to augment the traditional counseling and advising services with student voice, if you pardon the pun. It was a successful thing for a number of years. I don't believe it's still in existence now, but it's a great example of the student-centered approach at San Jose State. So kudos to your college, and I hope we can see more of that.
Great.
Juliana says it's a great idea. Juliana, do you have any examples from your institution? So I think it's Santa Monica College, right?
Yes, yes. I'm new to my position, so I'm still trying to figure out things out. We are just starting a Spanish club, and we are trying to see what are the things that we can incorporate there. Um, so I like the idea of the podcast and this thing about former students coming back to talk with the current students. I think is great. Yeah, Santa Monica College has a lot of things like a projects, and it has a lot of groups. But I'm just starting with the Spanish one, and we are trying to see how. I mean, it's new for me, so was great because it can give me some ideas about how to support them.
Great. And I know you're library director over there. So if it's ever goes through your library, we can collaborate in some way.
Great, great. That would be amazing. Yes, it's my first year as a full-timer, so I'm still trying to survive the first year, but yes.
Are there any other questions? If not, Lilia, can you go to the last slide just so they have our information? I think by now you know where to find us. But I know we're, I think, at time, correct? I believe so.
We are at time. We want to give space for the next group to get ready to present. But thank you so much, Lilia and Dr. Villagran. This is, again, we're honored that you present each year the progress you've been making. That's one of the things we love about this conference is it gives space for colleges, universities, and individuals to share kind of the things that they're moving forward and the progress they've made. So thank you so much for that. I've already linked to your podcast from the webpage description of your session. And if you want to share the slides or anything else, we'll add that along with the recording once we're ready to go. I'm going to stop the recording, speaking of which, but we encourage everyone to join me in thanking Lilia and Dr. Villagran for a fantastic presentation.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you for being here and for this space. We really do. That's why we come back every year. It's so critical. So thank you again.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for letting me practice presentation. It's like I'm not used to public speaking, so this was good practice.
You did great.
You sure
Thank you.
did.